Good Tuesday afternoon and welcome to Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas in the Rio Grande Valley of Deep South Texas. And joining me today is South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez. Hey, Sandra.
Hi, Rudy.
Hey.
Great to be here.
Good to have you. What are we going to be talking about today?
We're going to be talking about remembering those migrants who have died trying to cross the border, whether in the brush or through the river.
A very, very serious and very little talked about topic.
And timely with all the issues happening in Central Texas right now with water issues.
Absolutely. Well, we'll check in with you in just a moment. But right now, we do have an update on that story we told you about yesterday, starting with an update on that deadly shooting at a McAllen, Texas Border Patrol station. Now, new today, we're learning more about some more injuries and more on that timeline of events that occurred yesterday, starting at about 6 o'clock in the morning. Now, according to McAllen Police, the father of the suspect that Border Patrol agents shot and killed yesterday told police he was looking for his son shortly before 6 a.m. yesterday. Now, hours before, Mosqueda's father was stopped by police for a traffic violation, and those police officers say that he told them that he was looking for his son, who he said had psychological issues and was carrying weapons in his car. As far as those injuries, we're now learning that in addition to the McAllen PD officer we told you about yesterday who took that hit to the leg, that a Border Patrol agent and a Border Patrol employee were also injured. Now, no word on what injuries, except that one of those individuals was shot in the leg as well. Now, McAllen PD Chief Victor Rodriguez told me yesterday during a press conference that Ryan Luis Mosqueda, who was 27 years old, had an assault-style rifle while wearing a utility vest when he opened fire at the McAllen Airport Border Patrol station. As we reported, agents then shot him dead at the scene. Now, the FBI is investigating and has yet to provide a motive for this attack, but we're going to keep you updated both here on Border Report Live and on BorderReport.com. Now, over in California, dozens of federal officers in tactical gear roamed a mostly empty park in Los Angeles neighborhood with a large immigrant population for about an hour before they cleared out. Now, defense officials had said about 90 members of the California National Guard and over a dozen military vehicles would help protect immigration officers as they carried out a raid in MacArthur Park. Now, it's still not clear if anyone was actually arrested in that massive raid on the park that you can see those videos on your screen. Reporters say they saw at least 4 unmarked white vans resembling those commonly used by federal agents for detainee transport. LA's Mayor Karen Bass called it, quote, a political stunt, and said, what I saw in the park today looked like a city under siege, under armed occupation. Now, turning now to our subject of the day, it's no secret how dangerous crossing the Rio Grande is for people trying to make their way to our side of the U.S.-Mexico border, especially in the area of Eagle Pass. And I got some numbers for you. You may remember that area was ground zero for Texas Governor Greg Abbott's multi-billion-dollar immigration deterrence initiative known as Operation Lone Star. Well, according to data from Lighthouse Reports, almost 100 people drown in the Rio Grande trying to cross it every year on average. And now that number swelled up to about 150 back in 2022. And joining us today to talk about just that and talk about those folks who died trying to make it to the U.S. is from Border Vigil of Eagle Pass, America Garcia Graywall. Thanks for joining us, America.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Hi, America. Thanks for being on this show. I'm going to just start with some questions because you and I have met a number of times on the banks of the of the Rio Grande in Eagle Pass. And tell me, last night you all had another one of your monthly vigils that your group holds. I think we have some video with some images of from that vigil. Tell me, what did you do and why do you do this?
Well, since 2023, when the buoys were first installed in Maverick County in Eagle Pass, Texas, and the first bodies were found caught in the buoy barrier, we've been meeting on the banks of the Rio Grande River, and we've been putting white flowers into the river to remember those who are lost. Now, you may notice in the photographs that we're actually putting sunflowers in, yellow flowers, and that's because in the last month, in the month of June, there were no sets of human remains that were found, and there were also no bodies that were found in the Rio Grande River. And so we're putting in a sunflower, a symbol of strength and resilience, into the river. And it's also something that'll be echoed in August at the International Day of Friendship on August 16th, Friends Across Borders. We believe that nobody should be forgotten. And every month when we gather on the banks of the Rio Grande to remember the lives that were lost in migration, this is mothers, this is fathers, this is children, we want to remember their stories. Their stories often go untold. And the vigil is a reminder of what is happening, because too often stories like this are forgotten, or people will think that it's, the same person that died, even though they might have been, a great distance apart. And so we are calling for compassion and accountability in our border policies.
And you mentioned that yellow flowers may be signaling a little hope. And Rudy mentioned the number of people who have died, about 100. When I've been out there and there have been a number of people who have drowned, it does seem, though, that lately the numbers have decreased. Is that true? Is there a message that's going to the migrants telling them, don't try to cross here, it's dangerous? What is driving the numbers down right now?
The reason the numbers are going down is because people can no longer apply for asylum. And people were coming to the border and they were trying to find federal authorities so they could ask for asylum and turn themselves in. The root causes of migration are still very much present. But now that people can no longer apply for asylum, we're actually enriching the cartels. And we're doing so in two ways. One is that the cartels are still very active down in the valley where you are, also in El Paso. And they're ferrying people not just across the river, but to a final point, a final destination. And so we don't see folks in the river as much. Before, we saw people who were crossing on their own, who ran into trouble in the river and drowned. And fewer people are traveling by themselves. Now they're doing point-to-point transportation. But the other situation that's happening is that we've essentially outsourced the issue of dealing with this humanitarian crisis to the cartels, and they are enriching themselves by kidnapping people and forcing people into human slavery and into human trafficking in our South and Central American countries. And so what we see is a humanitarian crisis that shows a lack of empathy on the part of the United States. And there's currently no way for people to apply for asylum in the United States.
Let's unpack this a little bit for viewers and people who are listening. So what you're saying is, before, as we would see the images of hundreds of people who would come across the river and readily turn themselves in, they are no longer doing that. So there is more, if they are crossing, it's evasion. And so they are being delivered, you're saying, by the cartels, similar to what's happening in the Rio Grande Valley. They now are, in vehicles driving fast and furious through the northern counties to get past the checkpoint. So what you're saying is they're being transported further distances and through Eagle Pass because they're not turning themselves in.
Eagle Pass doesn't have much cartel activity, so I don't believe as much of that is happening here in Maverick County, but it's certainly happening along the border. And that is deadly in itself. We've just celebrated the 3-year anniversary, or we've just recognized the 3-year anniversary of the 53 migrants who were found dead in San Antonio. And unfortunately—
in the trailer. Yeah.
In the trailer, yes. And when we lose our ability to be compassionate as a nation, we're going to have more and more situations like this happen further away from the border, either here in Texas, in San Antonio. But for example, there were crematoriums that were found in the state of Durango, and it looks like there were as many as 200 people whose remains were disposed there. So we've taken a border issue, moved it away from the border, and taken it into the United States and taken it into Mexico. And we are enriching criminal activity every step of the way.
Let's stay there on the border in Eagle Pass. We had Lieutenant Chris Olivares of the Texas DPS recently on our show. He was saying that in 2023, Eagle Pass was the epicenter of crossings. No longer the case, but here's some video that I shot in 2024 near drownings. This was late 2023, actually. You see people trying to come across. The water's so high, they're holding on to the pylons under Bridge 2 there. She's almost swept away. Boats try to come to get her, but they can't. The wake is actually making the situation worse. And there's a group of migrants who themselves go in and rescue her. I know you said that recently there was a volunteer who you took to some of the shelters in Piedras Negras, which is the border town in Mexico, right across from Eagle Pass, to warn migrants there of the dangers. Who was that, and what did he or she say?
Yes, that was Elias Ortiz Eli from Águilas del Desierto. And goodness, 30 years ago, he actually crossed into the United States. And a few years later, his brother and his nephew died while trying to come into the United States. And he spent over $4,000 of his own personal money. And then the people that he paid to search for and find his family members were unable to do anything. So after 5 months of searching, he was actually able to find the remains of his brother and his nephew. And he said nobody should have to pay to find out what happened to their family. Nobody should go without answers the way we did. And so in the 90s, he founded Águilas del Desierto. And one of the things that he's realized after years and years of search and rescue and search and recovery operations in Arizona and New Mexico is that nobody should die. And he and the Águilas del Desierto have actually traveled from northern Mexico all the way down to Honduras, stopping in every single shelter, every single place they found a group of people, of migrants, and they've shared with them what they learned and basically given a prevention talk trying to keep people alive. I was really struck by it when I listened to him in Piedras Negras, because he said, I'm not here to talk you out of crossing. You spent so much of your time, you have nothing behind you and, except death. But I don't want you to die. You need to have a plan. You need to physically be healthy. You need to know where you're going to go. You need to know what you're going to do if you get into trouble. If you don't have these things, don't go, because you will die. And he was very frank. I could actually see mothers kind of holding their child a little bit closer. One of the things that he did is, he and the Águilas delivered a car full of food to the shelter, because he said it's just so important that people be healthy if we cannot talk them out of it, and they choose to cross.
Wow,
And,
that's really powerful. I think we have to take a break, right, Rudy?
Yeah, we're going to take a quick break, America, but we're going to continue the conversation when we come back. We're speaking with America Garcia Graywall with the Eagle Pass Vigil Group when we come back on Border Report Live. We'll see you in about a minute. Welcome back to Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, and I am your host for this Tuesday edition of Border Report Live today. And joining us today is America Garcia Graywall of the Border Vigil of Eagle Pass. America, I know your group works hand in hand with some of the other groups, including Operation Identification. Tell us a little bit about some of the things that you work with that agency.
Yes. So Operation ID is the name of a program of the Texas State University Forensic Anthropology Center, and they've been coming down to Eagle Pass for years now to identify people who are in our community who passed without any identification. And in August of 2024, Dr. Kate Bradley called up and said they're coming down. They had so many bodies and asked, I don't know how we're going to be able to do all this. And so then I asked, can we help you? And she kind of had this, I don't see why not. And then we pulled together 6 volunteers for that very first visit, who then became trained in the different activities of obtaining the biometrics from unidentified persons. And so we helped with note taking, we helped with the photography of the personal effects. We helped with examination of things like dentition, looking for tattoos, and we actually helped with obtaining of the fingerprints and the DNA extraction from the different bodies.
I was there last September. You were nice enough to allow me to come on site and see what the volunteers were learning as they trained, and you worked side by side with them. This was not an easy job. I mean, I had a mask on, and it was the smell was overwhelming. A lot of the images we actually can't show because they're so gruesome. There, what these volunteers are dealing with. That's a backpack that was found with someone. They're photographing remains right here to try to, get the word out that somebody, who this belongs to. And there is a blanket with an image of a woman. They believe her identification, the same identification, was also found with that. They think perhaps that one of the bodies matched to it. At the time America, there were 40 or so unidentified remains. What's your numbers like now? Are you guys helping to get these numbers down? Are you reuniting families and connecting them with loved ones who were lost and now they know what's happened to them?
We're doing our absolute best. The morgue is currently empty. We had 14 sets of remains that were buried in June, and we've taken the fingerprints, we've taken the biometrics, the information is in the database, their personal effects have been photographed, and we still don't know who they are. And because we don't have a direction to go in, those 14 sets of remains were buried in Maverick County in mid-June. We had one little girl, Antonella, who was 5 years old when she died, and her family couldn't afford to repatriate her. So we actually buried Antonella, and we buried a young man named Gustavo in Eagle Pass, and their family members were able to watch the service via WhatsApp, and different folks who were in attendance spoke to the family members while they were there. Dr. Spradley would have to give you...
Yeah, and you know what? Actually, you just mentioned Dr. Kate Spradley runs the Forensic Anthropology Department at Texas State University. She spearheads this entire operation identification. I think we have a quick soundbite when I interviewed her in September out there as they were starting this process.
So there's a lot of deaths here in Eagle Pass. Many of them are unidentified when they're found, and they don't have any circumstantial information with them. So we have come here to fingerprint those individuals.
We lost a little bit of the sound there, but we get the point. Now, one thing that's important to note is that the process here, we don't have a medical examiner in the Rio Grande Valley. Laredo has one, and there's Dr. Spradlin up near San Marcos, which is a good 250 miles away. So part of this problem, I believe, is this identification falls to the justices of the peace, and a lot of these bodies just kind of get put in trailers in different counties that can't identify them, right?
Unfortunately, that is the case. And I need to really emphasize that this is not the fault of Maverick County. The scope of death is really staggering. And we had a training session where the Harris County Medical Examiner spoke about the number of deaths that they experienced and the number of unidentified bodies. And Harris County had fewer unidentified bodies than Maverick County, and we are a fraction of their size. We don't have a medical examiner. We don't have the facilities, and our county judge and sheriff and everybody were doing the very best job they could. This problem has been created by the state of Texas and by the federal government with their policies, and yet they have not helped any with solving the problem. For example, Dimmitt County applied 3 times for a portable morgue like the one in Eagle Pass. The first year, they said no. The second year, they got $1. This year is the first year that the morgue was funded, and even then it was not fully funded. And so we have this horrible issue. We know exactly what's causing it, and yet we're not being given the tools to ease the pain and to give names back to the numbers that are in our community.
Maybe somebody will be listening to this broadcast and might be able to come up with a solution, right, Rudy?
Maybe. And, you know, one of the things you're talking about, funding America, well, there has been state funding for immigration-related activities, but it's not exactly probably what your group wants to see, and we're going to talk more about that, and we'll continue this conversation with America Garcia Graywall when we come back on Border Report Live. We'll see you in a minute. And welcome back to Border Report Live, the Tuesday edition. And we are speaking with America Garcia Graywall. Let me switch that back there. America Garcia Graywall. America. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Sandra, I know you had a question for America.
Yeah, well, we've been talking about Operation Identification, the Border Vigil. Now, you're also going to start a search and rescue volunteer effort training happening Saturday. Tell us quickly what's going on. What are you all doing there?
Yeah. Another time I was speaking with Kate Spradley, and I commented on how all of the bodies were drowning deaths and Maverick County didn't have deaths of exposure. And almost in stereo, the anthropologist said, because you haven't looked. And that was late in 2024. Since then, I've been trying to find the expertise and the skills that we need to set up search and recovery missions here in Maverick County. I met with Águilas del Desierto in March, and they came down for a site visit in June. We pulled them together. We had 21 volunteers. And we're slowly picking up the skills that we need and the equipment that we need to go into parts of Maverick County that have open missing person cases. And the plan is to use the protocols developed by groups like Águilas del Desierto, also used in Valpurias, Texas, by Eddie Canales, the South Texas Human Rights Center, and start finding some of these answers to the questions that have been open for years.
Now, Eddie, as we all know, passed within the past year, so that left a big void for helping to find these migrants who are missing. You're going to have a training in Ensenal on Saturday. Is that open to other people, or did you need to have been part of the pre-training ahead of time?
It is open to other people, and we welcome them. Folks can reach out to me, bordervigil@gmail.com, and I can get them the details they need. They should come in Friday night because we'll be starting at the crack of dawn on Saturday morning, and we're going to be out in the field as long as weather allows us to.
And Ensenal is about northeast of Laredo.
Yes, about 35 miles northeast of Laredo.
Okay, very, very desolate country out there. Going back to Eagle Pass for a moment, you all have had the controversial border buoys put in the middle of the Rio Grande, and 1,000-foot border buoy. This is some video I shot about a year ago at a cost of $1 million. But I understand that the buoys are now longer. Did Governor Abbott increase the size there?
Yes, that particular stretch that you see has doubled in size. It's now 2,000 feet long. And they also took heavy machinery into the water and they washed the buoys. The buoys had a lot of trees and other things that accumulated in them. And so I actually have footage I'll have to send you of them with heavy machinery actually washing the buoys so that they'll look better. So what we're seeing here is a political stunt. It's not about stopping people. It's about looking good on camera. And I think that's what's going on in Los Angeles as well. So it's not about actually fixing a problem. It's about flexing muscle and saying, we can do this. And one of the things that's really frustrating is that the money that's going into these shows of force, the money that goes into these political stunts, is money that is not going to search and recovery, search and rescue missions in Kerrville. It's federal dollars that are not going to the National Weather Service. And we are actually we are hurting people in the United States because we're so busy trying to gain political points. And so I really hope that we can express our humanity, offer asylum to the people in the world who need it, because it'll be good for us as a country, not just the people who come into our country, but for the people who live here right now.
We just have a couple minutes left, America. Talk to us as a community how the border buoys have affected you, because I don't know if you're aware, but just last week it was announced that almost a 20-mile long water barrier will be put in the Rio Grande here off Cameron County. I'm here in Harlingen right now. So from Brownsville to the tip of near the Gulf, where the Gulf meets. How has that affected the environment, the community? Do you have access to the Rio Grande? And what are your thoughts on it?
Eagle Pass does not have any public access to the Rio Grande River at all. Shelley Park was the only public boat ramp, and that's completely unavailable. And even some unofficial boat ramps, areas that we used to go down to, have concertina wire over them, and we don't have access to them. The buoys themselves, the 2,000 feet that are in Maverick County, are actually not visible from the city of Eagle Pass, and they're off of private property. So they don't affect the community itself, but they do have an effect on the impact. They're in a shallow part of the river, and they serve as large boulders. And so what they actually do is speed up the river on one side and slow it down on the other side. Essentially, they're building an island around themselves because of the way they're in the river, and it's hollowing out soil from the Mexican side of the river and depositing that soil onto the United States side of the river, which of course is violation of the treaties that we have that said that neither country will do anything to alter the flow of the river or the riverbed itself.
I was there and they watched them. They actually moved the buoys closer to the U.S. side because they had been in the middle of the river. I'm getting a symbol from Rudy. We have less than a minute left. But there have been some studies that have also shown potential environmental impact from having the buoys, and I think you have also been part of that. Well, here the Rio Grande is very deep. We actually have warnings. We have placards put up. We bring this up because as Central Texas suffers from this worst tragic flash flooding that has happened, continue to warn that the Rio Grande is a huge river. It's unpredictable. This is right here in off Ansel Dewis Park in McAllen. And, you wouldn't expect the river to be that big. These are special new signs Border Patrol has put up warning people to not try to risk it. America Garcia Graywalt, thank you so much for talking to us today. Right, Rudy?
Yeah, we really appreciate it. It's always good to shine a light on these, really untold stories. So we appreciate you talking with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Sandra, of course. And thank you at home for watching Border Report Live today. If you'd like to see the other stories Sandra and the rest of our team of award-winning border journalists are working on, or watch this episode or any other episode of Border Report Live again, you can visit borderreport.com. Until tomorrow, my name is Rudy Mireles from the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. Have a great day.